All right, today's talk. So, you've been training. Got this A race, right? Big race. Priority for the year. Things are going well. Training has been, you know, just great. You've been hitting everything. You've been hitting all your metrics. You've been hitting all your distances. And then all of a sudden, we come to this magical part of your training, which we all love because we get to reduce the volume and the intensity, right? Taper. So today we're talking about taper. What is it? How to do it? How it could really, impact your race day, good or bad, and just some of the basics. There's plenty of methods and theories, and it is individualized. There's no one set of taper. So one thing I want to get across in this video is when you're training with your friends, everybody has different goals. Everybody is in a different part, whether they're beginner, intermediate, advanced level athlete. Why are you doing this workout? You should be in taper. People talk back and forth to each other to try and, but if you're working with a coach specifically, work with them. Everything's individualized, as you'll see. Everybody kind of might be in a different spot with their taper. Everybody's body kind of responds a little bit different as well. And this is something you learn over time and get better every time you do go through one of these points in training towards the end when you're getting towards that race with your taper. So let's talk about it real quick. What really is taper? Okay, so typical training plan. Now this works for everybody. This is runners, triathletes, whatever it is. Periodization, right? We've had a base building phase, maybe sometime on the off season leading into your race. You may have a set period of time in this plan, 3, 4, 5 months into race day. You're building towards that big A race. But that last block of training, typically the last couple weeks, is going to be the taper. You've now systematically progressed through your workouts, incrementally going up in distance, going up in volume for the week, and then you've peaked, right? We peak training, longest hours, longest distance, and then we're going to come back down now to race day. We're going to systematically freshen the body up. We're going to scale back training, scale down volume, and again, freshen the body up. Get ready for that race effort to have that good day, which we put all this time and energy into hopefully building for a good race day. A well-executed taper is a real key to success here. And that's and it's compounded amongst longer distances. So if you're training for your first, short run race, short triathlon, there really doesn't need to be much taper built into that. What we're talking about here is basically from the half marathon, half Ironman distance, and beyond. When you get into the full distances or even some type of, ultra endurance type activities. We've peaked now. We hit our peak amount of training. We want to come back down, but there is some caveats with this. We don't want to come down too much, too quickly for an extended period of time. The body is a funny thing. As we're training, you probably are training on different modalities. We're talking about speed and strength, endurance, certain types of workouts for certain specific things that we're working on that make you a well-rounded athlete. So just remember, with speed and strength, that's a long-term gain. That's things you work on for a long period of time. You kind of hold on to these things for a little longer period of time. When we talk about endurance, when we're talking about building that capability to run for miles and cycle for hours and building that happens, you do build it quickly. Week after week, you're adding volume, you're adding miles, you're going from 5 miles to 7 miles, to 8 miles, 10 miles, 11 miles. You're progressing basically every week a certain percentage. But the thing is, you can start to lose that very quickly as well. The body is a funny thing. It's like they say it's about 48 to 72 hours is kind of without a certain stimulus, the brain and the body start to drift away from what it knows. So think about it. Go for a runner who only runs once or twice a week. That's if you're only running on Mondays and Thursdays, though there's a decent amount of time in between each run. The body just tends to, the further it gets from an activity, go back to where it was before that. Body in motion stays in motion. That's what I like to say. So typically, if you want to get better at something, you need to do it more often and at the right intensity, and that's going to help you go leading into it. So that's what we're doing. Taper is focusing on rest. Volume is the big thing. You want to reduce your volume, but you do want to keep some of that intensity in there. If you're just 2-3 weeks out from an event, say, hey, that's it. I hit all these good little paces in my workouts, my trainings, my tempos, my intervals. I need to rest and I'll just go out for some runs and some bikes or whatever it is up until race day, you may wind up showing up on race day. You may feel fresh, but your body, your effort wise, may be flat because you didn't put in a little bit of short burst intensity throughout the taper. So the big takeaway with taper is volume comes down depending on how long your taper is, week for week. But you do want to keep some short intensity efforts in there because we do want to keep all the muscles firing. We do want to remind the body that there is a large effort coming because your body doesn't know. It doesn't have a calendar inside your muscles that say, oh, your half marathon or half Ironman is coming up in 14 days. Make sure you stay primed. It just senses all of a sudden a longer than normal period of lower volume. And if you take all the intensity away, it's going to think, that's it. I don't need to do this anymore. I'm good. Whatever was going on or whatever, you had training wise, stimulus wise is done. And now I can kind of go back to just being, just that chill, baseline level. That's what you got to remember. And now let's talk about duration real quick. So again, taper comes into play more for this half and full distance. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. And it's individualized. You need to figure out ahead of time because you want to time this right. Are you a beginner athlete or are you an intermediate athlete who can have a little more volume and needs that volume to kind of stay in peak fitness? Or are you the beginner athlete who's hitting this distance for the first time? So, for some of my athletes that I help coach, if you're doing your first half marathon or even half Ironman, depending on what your goals are, we may peak you into that race because how many times do I want to train you at such a high amount of miles on a long run prior to your first half marathon when, these are the first times in your entire life that you're actually hitting these distances. But if you're a seasoned runner who's run quite a few of these half marathons before, we can push the volume a little more during training and kind of keep a little more volume during taper to keep you fresh because you want that speed and intensity and that big endurance fitness that you want for race day, as opposed to treading that line with that beginner athlete where how much is too much in training or what's your goal for the race. If we're just looking to have fun, finish the race, get a number, get a finish time on that race, we may just peak you volume wise right into that race and give you a short taper, and you're just going to put it all together on race day, have a good day, cross that finish line, and then go from there and have at it next year and put a little more volume and intensity into your training. So those are the things that we take into account. For my athletes, what I like to tell them is, this is an average basically amongst everybody who would be doing some type of taper, is for that half distance, we like to about 2-week time frame. So 3 weeks before your race should be your really long stuff, your longest weekend of training, your biggest block of training. You're peaking at that point. And then we can bring down some of the volume towards race day. You can come down about 25% in volume each week towards race week. Specifically, the last 7 days, you really want to keep your efforts really short, but still pop some intensity in there. So if you're talking about cycling, again, you want to go out for a 45-minute cycle, 50-minute cycle. Just put some efforts in there. Put a quick little 1-minute, 2-minute efforts in there, but keep the rest of the workout generally on the easy side. So you really have a difference in that of just keeping the legs fresh, popping in some intensity to keep those muscles firing. Same with the running. You can go out for an easy run, 6 mile or 7 mile, maybe on every mile. You just put some strides in, quick 20 seconds, just get those legs spinning up, then bring it back down because you don't want to deplete the body too much. We want to start building towards race day, refueling our body, refreshing, repairing all the muscles, that we've used and kind of damaged through training and go from there. Once we get to longer marathon, full iron training, things like that, we may extend it out another week. We may push a week earlier. So maybe, 3 to 4 weeks before race day would be that really big peak week, peak workout, and then kind of start bringing it down. Now, remember, it's still long stuff because your peak ride for a full iron is going to be, probably a 100-miler. And that might be the second time you've done a 100-miler, depending on what type of training plan you're following. So coming down 25% is still a 75-mile ride. Another 25% is going to be still another 50, 60-mile ride the next week. So in terms of, average people and their type of endurance or activity that they like to do, this is still long stuff. This is still long workouts. But remember, you still have, those are still very important workouts, almost just as important as when you're building up to that distance, because you don't want to just peak at your 100, say I'm good, coast for 3 weeks, because you're going to probably turn up flat on race day and just not be as efficient as you could have been on race day. But there is then that borderline where too much, you can be doing too much during taper. So it is this fine line, and you really need to kind of figure it out and have a plan ahead of time, so you're not just spinning your wheels, or you're not getting a little anxiety because you think you're not doing enough before a race day. Remember, if you're more fit as an athlete and have more consistent training, it's been pretty solid throughout, we can modify that taper a little bit. Maybe you don't need as much, or maybe you trained a little too hard. You went too hard this training block, and you really weren't doing your easy stuff easy like you were supposed to do, and you're starting to get some little things that are starting to bother you. So maybe we want to back it down a little bit and make sure that we have that good amount of taper time, so you can kind of recoup a little bit and have that body heal a little bit before race time. I like to refer to it as keeping the engine idling. So think about it. You don't want to shut the engine down. You've already built this big, sports car engine throughout training. Things are primed. You put all the parts and modifications in and made it this well-oiled, machine for race day. You don't just shut the engine off. You got to let it run. You got to let it simmer. And then when it's time, race day, we're all primed up. We show up to that start line motivated, fresh, hopefully uninjured, and ready to rock on race day. So now here's some other things that we're talking about race week. If you're not familiar with the longer distance events, halves, fulls, things like that, some interesting things are going to start to happen during taper time. And it's okay to feel this way. There's going to be a lot of things going on in your body. Think about it. You have now been basically, hammering your body for 4 to 5 or plus months of more, and now you're sliding down. You didn't just get your 1 week of recovery back into building. You're now having a little more than that typical recovery time. So things are going to start to feel a little different in your body. Your body is actually recovering on this like macro level, this bigger level than you allowed it to prior. Muscle tension is going to start to feel a little different. Your body's probably was really tense during training. It was that fine line with stretching and getting, active release done and all these other things. And now your muscles are finally starting to change a little bit tension-wise, because there's not as much load on them week after week. And you're also going to have, think about it. If you're doing stuff every day, long periods, long bouts of exercise, and now we're scaling that all down week after week, there's going to be all different blood flow changes inside your body. So you do want to keep moving. So even if you have a rest day built in, a full rest day or a very short workout, still move. Go for a walk. Do foam rolling. Keep the blood flowing through your body. Keep your body moving on a very easy level. You want to just make sure the muscles are still working, blood is flowing to the muscles, and your body is still in motion. Remember, a body in motion stays in motion. And also, you're going to become just there's going to be this hyper awareness on your body. So you may have had a little bit of a calf tightness throughout training you've been dealing with, or hamstrings tightening during training. Those things are going to start to rear their ugly head during this taper, and every little pinch that you feel on you're just hyper aware. So you're going to think that it's a much bigger problem than it really is. Now, it could be a problem. If you really think you're in pain, you need to go get it checked out. But just things start changing your body. They start recovering again on this bigger scale, and you start to feel things that you maybe didn't feel through training. This is natural. This is normal. Things happen during the taper. You're going to feel different things. But the biggest is make time to rest and recover outside of these easier efforts in training. Don't, a week before your race, decide to repaint your house or make a big project at home. Just think about it. You've invested how much time, energy, and or money financially. If you have a coach and you've signed up for this race and it wasn't a cheap race, you may be traveling to this race. You want to have a good day. At least control what we can control. Again, I always say control the controllables. Race day is race day. That's a whole nother story. Things happen. But you want to be able to control what you can control. And this is what you can control. The week before, even though you're like, I'll have some more time. I only have to train a few hours this week, the week of race week. You have to intentionally plug in time to be able to rest, recover, rebound from this training, fueling, hydrating, make sure you're staying on top of all that and keeping that body nice and fresh. You're going to start, hopefully in a in a taper, you're going to start at some point during a taper to feel fresh. You're going to start to feel hungry, motivated, right? You could be 4 or 5 days out from the race and just start getting itching, like, I want to put in a good effort. I just want to go out and run today. Save those race efforts. Don't be doing what you should be doing on race day during your taper. It's very hard, to just wait a few more days. You want to save that energy and motivation. If you're starting to feel that way, your taper is perfect. And it is a fine balance. Sometimes you really want that motivation to start falling as close to race day as you can. But if you're starting to feel those feelings, that getting excited, my body feels good, I'm fueled up, I'm fresh, I'm ready to go, you've hit your taper right. You're going to have a great day on race day. Put everything together, come up with a plan, come up with a pacing plan, a strategy for the day. During this taper, you should be thinking about race day now. I always say, learn from the past, glance at the future, worry about today. This is the point now where you can start glancing at that future a little bit more. Start running that race in your head. Start going through how much fuel I'm going to use, when I'm going to fuel, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do in transition. If you run that race multiple times inside your head before you show up on race day, when you show up on race day, you're going to feel like you've done this race 100 times before. I know in my head, if I'm coming up with a big race, a race that I've put a lot of time and focus into, I've been thinking about that race. And more so in the recent future during that taper time is I've been planning. I've been making some notes. I know what I need to do and what I have to do on race day. And at least, again, if you can control the controllables that day, take care of what you think you can take care of. How much sleep you get the nights before, fueling, making sure you have all your gear, everything squared away. Your bike's good. If you can show up that day prepared with all that stuff and the training's done, you're a winner in my book. You're done. Race day is race day. Anything can happen. We all have crap days. Things happen. It's too hot. It's too cold. It rains. You have a mechanical issue out there. Whatever it is, it wasn't your day. You got sick the night before. But if you can show up at least with all those boxes checked, there you go. You've done it. Again, taper, enjoy it. Biggest thing, get some rest. Don't overdo it. There's nothing you can do. The big takeaways, there's nothing you can do in the last 2 to 3 weeks of training before a big race like this that's really going to elevate or boost your fitness or your ability on race day to any magnitude. But there is a lot of things you can do in that 2 to 3 week period to just shipwreck your entire race and your entire day. And that's the biggest takeaway, really. So enjoy that taper, have fun, plan for it, plan your days out, enjoy it, enjoy this little bit of extra time because race day is going to come and go before you know it. Enjoy every minute out there, whatever race you have coming up. Enjoy it, stay safe, stay healthy, balance that life 1 mile at a time. I'll see you on the next one.